Well, we are up for our fifth clue for this Mystery Monday. I've done a lot of Mystery Mondays, but I have to say, you all have helped this to be so much fun. We've had some enthusiastic participants, people really digging into their stashed fabric and learning a lot about themselves. What I've seen in this Mystery Monday is we've talked a great deal about what fabric to save, what not to save, what to do with it. And I think the big discovery, the big aha for many people was if something is smaller than 4 inches, a lot of you aren't enjoying sewing with it. And my recommendation is that maybe you learned in this process that it might be time not to keep saving those fabrics. Now, if you are a person who enjoys saving fabrics, great, have a way at it, and I'll come up with more projects that you can use the scraps in. But if you haven't learned by putting together maybe a different background, so some people put navy in there, some people tried yellow, some people tried teal. People have done some amazing things in this one, and we've brought out a lot of different colors. Sometimes that helps to tone it down. If your taste is not right now scrappy, some of you have evolved to say, this was a lot of fun. And today, when I'm showing you the pieces that we're going to do to bring this together, I think you're going to be really even more pleased with what you've done. I know it's been a little disconcerting to put things together and not really know how they're going to go together. This will really help you to discern what you're doing with the fabrics that you're keeping, what you maybe shouldn't be keeping, and how you want to go in the future. So we've had some really amazing finishes that people have been bringing in. Look at these beauties. Isn't this just stunning? Really great stuff happening. And we're seeing people really dig into their stash of fabric, bringing out some solid backgrounds or things that are bringing all the colors together and really digging in there, getting those 4 patches done. Those are the setting pieces that we're going to be building out of these projects. And you're going to be seeing that a little bit more as you go along. Now, there are some pieces that inspired me in here. I love the newspaper prints, fabrics that we saw. I love the yellow. I love the teal. I love all the things that people have done to bring it together. And I have had the benefit of knowing where this is going. So as I watched it, I didn't have to coach anybody on, hey, you're going the wrong direction. Everybody's going exactly the best direction. So no more secrets, okay? Let's show you where these go. This is the quilt that we're making. It's called Backroads Drifter. It was a big aha moment. There we go. I'm going to show you how to unpack this in this lesson. How'd that get in there? Well, there it is. And there are a couple of versions that we did. So one of the things we're going to be doing is we're going to frame our blocks out to be 9.5 inches edge to edge. That's in your instructions. Let's take a peek at the block framing. Now in that block framing, we are going to be adding to the sides of it the way that we had designed the last pieces. So first, let's do our last star. So this is our last star that we're going to be doing. And the first thing that I did was I went in and sorted my fabrics. I was so inspired by that graphic that I went and chose a K facet fabric and I put it together with a fabric called Blessings, and it's a newspaper print. That background fabric on the bottom is a wide goods. So I'm going to choose my feature fabric. I love this daisies. The Gerber daisies really spoke to me. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut a strip. This is going to be a 9-inch finished block. So we're going to cut that big quarter square triangle first. This is going to be cut out of for as if it's a 9-inch finish. So I need to cut this at 5 inches because this literally is going to take up half of the whole block. So that quarter square height needs to be the height of what half the block is. So here I am cutting it with 5 inches, and I'm going to trim the two sides. As you notice, I positioned that Gerber daisy in there. Now look here, I didn't have enough fabric to go on and make another one. So I'm going to choose the supporting triangles. That's along the side where I didn't have enough fabric. I'm not going to use that as any of my supporting triangles. I decided at this point that what I'm going to do is I was going to bring in support for that Gerber daisy with some solids. So I have some Kona solids in my kit that I was working with. And so I chose a few of those. And now I'm going to be cutting these at 2 3/4. Now, one of the first pieces that I'm going to be cutting is I have to cut a supporting quarter square triangle that goes alongside of that big one. So these are my smaller quarter square triangles. These are the same size that we would cut for that frame. Remember the frames? So I'm cutting out a 2 3/4 inch when I'm making a 9-inch finished block. And so I'm going to cut the 2 that I need because I need 2 of these quarter square triangles to go next to my other big quarter square triangle. Ta-da! Okay, now we need several half square triangles. We have flying geese unit on the top, flying geese unit on the bottom. So I'm going to bring my other fabrics in, and I'm going to be cutting these at 2 3/4 again. So I cut it about 3 inches. Then I turn the strip, and then I trim it down to 2 3/4 out of my strip. And then I'm going to cut this at a 90-degree angle because I need that 90-degree angle for my half square triangle. Grabbing my half square triangle specialty ruler. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to line it up with that 2 3/4 inch strip. I'm going to cut one. I'm going to flip my ruler over so I can see that 2 3/4 on the back. And I'm going to trim out another one. There I've got my little half square triangles. I'm going to do the background frame pieces now, and this is out of that newspaper print. Love this, 108-inch wide. This was some leftover I had in my stash. So I'm going to cut this at 2 3/4, and then I'm going to stack it up on the other fabric. So now I have 4 because I need 4 quarter square triangles for my frame and 4 squares for my corners. So the first thing I'm going to cut is I go past my 2 3/4. I'm going to cut my squares for my corners. Voila. Put my quarter square triangle on there. Ooh, that's close, but it worked. And so now I've got my frame for my block. So let's look at what that looks like. So I'm going to audition my block out. And again, this is a 9-inch finished block. So I'm going to put out the frame, and I've got my quarter square triangles. I've got my squares for the corners. And I might fuss a little bit with that newspaper print and put it the way I want. But look at that big quarter square triangle. It spans the whole width of my block. That's why I had to cut that so that it was the finishing of half the block. Can't wait to sew this one. It's going to be really fun to sew. So I'm going to stack up all my pieces because I'm only cutting one of these blocks. Because what I want to do now is take you over to AccuQuilt and show you how that's going to cut out. So on this one, I can only cut it out of 1 if I want the whole thing cut out of AccuQuilt. And when I say that, I took the 12-inch cube and I'm cutting a 6-inch finished quarter square. So this block is going to be a finished block. Remember, the base of that quarter square has to span the full block, which is 6 inches by 6 inches. So I was able to locate that in my 12-inch cube. I put 1 on there, which means I'm going to get 4 of those quarter square triangles. Now we're going to cut the smaller quarter square triangles. These are cut from my 6-inch cube. And so those smaller quarter square triangles are going to be cut out of a 6-inch cube to pair up with my 12-inch cube. So first thing I'm going to start with is I'll start with my background frame pieces. So I'm going to need 4 of those for every one of my blocks. Remember, I had 4 of those big quarter square triangles. So that means I need one of those squares of fabric 4 times for this. So I measured it again to make sure I was right, stack them up there, and then I need squares as well because I need them for the corner. Now we're going to choose the supporting triangles. So the first thing I'm going to need is I'm going to need my quarter squares, my small quarter squares, and then I'm going to need my half squares for that flying geese unit on the top and the bottom. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm pulling these out because for each one I'm going to need 2 small quarter squares. So I really only need 2 of that, and I go back and I find that quarter square triangle die and put that out there. Now I'm going to need lots of little half square triangles for this. So I pulled out all of my littlest fabrics. You know those ones that usually are landing in your stash and you don't know what to do with them? I didn't really count these. I just took everything that was so tiny that I couldn't normally cut it. And then I went ahead and I'm going to get ready to cut it. So I found more little fabrics and I thought, well, I'll just keep cutting these half squares until I get all those little pieces gone. So it's all cut now. Now we're ready to come back and we're going to audition these 6-inch blocks. So when I put these together, the first thing I always like to do when I'm auditioning them, I like to lay my frame out because it really helps me to see where the whole block is going to land. And then I tend to find I make less mistakes. So there's that big quarter square triangle. Now I'm going to audition the lavenders next to it. Now I'm going to go get my little half squares, all those little extra half squares. And I'm fine with having extra ones of those. That gives me lots of choices. Now I'm auditioning some different colorways. And all I really have to do at this point is just flip around those solid fabrics for this block. Now I'm going to stack them up by units because these will make it easier for me when I go to the sewing machine. So my big quarter squares, stack it up, head on over. Now before we do that, let's look at a side set die. So this is a tool that AccuQuilt makes, and you read a lot about these. This is a side set for 12 inches. So if I made 12-inch blocks and I wanted to put side sets and I wanted to set it on point, this is my 12-inch. Did you notice it's bigger than my traditional quarter squares and half squares? This ruler that I have on there is showing you the side set ruler. So it shows you this is how, if you ever want to cut bigger triangles than what you have dies for, the side sets are really good. If you want to talk to me about that sometime, happy to show you. So let's get over to the sewing machine. So I've got a little ender in there for my previous project, 2 half square triangles. These are my quarter square triangles, my smaller ones that are going to go on the left and the right of that big quarter square triangle that is the center of the block. So I sewed the 2 of them. I go back to these. I always do my pressing here, and I use my point-to-point turner or my fingernail, and I do that pressing. We're going to be talking about pressing later on in this lesson, and I'm going to show you some things that I did with these. So now I'm framing that big center triangle, that quarter square, with those double little quarter squares. Now the reason I know it's little quarter squares is then when I'm sewing those diagonals on, I'm nailing down all of the bias fabric. Now on the top and the bottom of these are all flying geese. We always put the left side on first, and on the sky onto the goose. And I'm using that almost like an ender to pull this out. So now I'm taking this out of the machine, the center. I'm pressing it with my fingers, and then I'm going to put that other side on there. So I have my right side on, then my left side on, and then this is when I discovered, ruh-roh, that centerpiece is technically a big old flying geese unit. And it was good learning to be able to sew the whole one out to say, yeah, that is a big old flying geese unit. We'll look at that a little bit more. So all those flying geese that I'm creating for the tops and the bottoms are now becoming my enders and leaders because I have far more sewing to do on the top and the bottom than I actually had in the middle. So the middle of this block is all done now. And now I'm just putting the frames for the top and the bottom. So I'll just keep running both of them through the machine, sewing them as flying geese, sending them through the machine, doing the left and the right consistently. And I'm pressing these towards my solid. Now what we're going to do is we're going to add the corners. Those are my corners from my frames, and I'm going to be adding them to each side of my work. And so I can go ahead and put those all together. Now, with these, I chose to do my purple on the top and my pink on the bottom, or vice versa. But as I started working with the little ones, I could find that I could actually mix those up. I could have made them all different too. I didn't have to make them to match. So, again, a good reason to be doing that entire block first, and to do one entirely so then you can look at it. Now, it's not a mistake, and I'm not going to dismiss it. It's a great block yet. So now I'm going to add the top to this. Now, when I add it to the top, to the bottom of this block, I have that big old wide section, and I don't have a seam in the middle there. So I'm using my Annie's Tailor's awl, and then I'm walking this through the machine, bossing the seams whichever way, I want them to go. And then we're going to keep finishing up that last flying geese. We're going to add our boxes on it. It's so satisfying to do that pressing while you go along. You can get it to lay out really nice and flat. Now I'm going to actually press those seams with my point-to-point turner. Now we're going to attach the bottom. And when we attach the bottom, we now are going to have a seam to deal with that are matching. I pull out my Annie's awl and I match the points. Now watch what happens as I come up on that. I push that point into one, I look underneath, and that tailor's awl keeps it so that I can match it up so that I can keep those 2 points together. So let's choose more fabrics. So now we're going to take all my little pieces. These are my 6-inch blocks that I'm going to work on, and we're going to sew up that smaller block. So I've got my center pieces, that floral, that black floral. Kafe actually calls those neutrals, by the way. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pair up my little quarter squares and I'm going to send them through. Now, when I'm sewing these smaller units, I don't change anything about my stitch length. I might slow down a little bit, but I do a little bit more on setting them up before I go into the machine because I want to make sure that I have them right where I need them to be. So there's my big block all done. Ta-da. There she is. And now I'm going to go keep working on those smaller blocks. So when I say that about sewing slower, I don't sew slower because I can't take it, but I want to make sure I give myself time when I go in and sew like these. I'm putting the sky on the left side of that flying goose. I'm always starting at the nose. So the goose is facing up. So I start at the nose, I put the left one on, and I walk it into the machine. As you notice, I'd make sure that my line is going in perpendicular to the needle. That way I don't take 2 or 3 stitches sideways and then correct it, and that's how you lose your points. And so in this one, I'm doing a little bit of chain piecing, which I don't always tell you to do, but on these guys, I'm really confident I'm gonna need flying geese for the top and the bottom. And now I'm batch pressing about 4 or 5 of them at a time, and then I'm gonna walk them over to the machine and I'm gonna put them together. So let's go back to the center unit. Now in that center unit, I'm going to add my quarter square sets. And this time I'm going to add the left side first. I put it down so that the goose is facing up so I can start at the nose and head down. I'm going to keep that point much better. And again, my geese are my enders and my leaders because I have to work on, let's see, 8 of these, 8 sets of these, or 4, 8 of them total to go on the left and the right of my 4 blocks that I'm making. And so now I'm going to put that other sky unit onto that center. And if you notice, I was able to keep much more control over that because I put the left side on first. So here come my geese. I'm starting to put the background corners on the lefts and the rights of them. I prefer to have all the piecing facing me because then I have all that bulk on top. So there's another center done. I've got a couple of them done here. And then I'm going to go back and keep putting more geese on there. Now, when I put that right sky on, again, I start at the top, but this time I can see the sky unit on the top of it. And so keep adding those units to the left and the right. This block actually sews together faster. I chose this block for your last one because I didn't want to fool you at the beginning and make you seem like they were all going to be that easy. This will be an aha and a whew. So now we're going to attach it to the top of that block. And again, like with this one, when I attach it to the one side, I do look at those seams and decide which way can this one go. And again, we'll be looking at pressing here in a little bit, and we're going to be, making some decisions and showing you some things that we do with pressing these out. And I don't press the seams open. Batting will get through. You don't really want to do that. And, it works really well when you're doing this finger pressing. You don't want to use it, make it more difficult. And so now I'm going to put some more sky units onto the right-hand side and keep working through. You want to work incrementally with this, like when we talked about sewing before, about sewing a little bit slower, taking your time, setting things up. Think of all the time you're saving in cutting. Think of all the time you're saving not running to the ironing board all the time, mis-sewing things, unsewing things, all those other things. Take your time and really enjoy the process of building these blocks. These are a lot of fun to build, and it's a really good exercise for you to go through and take your time and really take some pride in what you're doing. When you work on this, piece by piece, you can watch it come together, and it just is really fun. Now on this one, I'm adding that bottom piece to it, and I'm hitting that X that I can see on that other piece. Again, finger pressing them out. Did you see it? There it is. Voila. Cute little thing. So let's review the block. We're starting with that middle quarter square. We're taking the 2 quarter squares and putting them together, and then we're attaching them to the 2 sides of the block. And you attach the left side first, then the right side. Now what we're going to do is we're going to look at the frames, and basically this is just creating flying geese, left sky, right sky, adding the corners to that. Now that didn't look left sky and right sky because that goose is upside down. But I did do it that way. So left sky goes first, at the right sky, always sewing from the top down so you can kind of see where you're going with it. Put the squares onto the sides and then walk them up there to the block. Let's look at some color versions. So we're going to change the background on this one. Lighten it up, make it a little lavender, make a sweet little lavender to it. There's so many things you can do with this block, and this block would be a really good one to put a really fun character print in the middle. Did you see that? And give it a little pop of color. It doesn't always have to be there if they're on the same side. You can move them around. What about if you add dark to the background? This has been fun to watch people putting different colors together into things and trying different backgrounds. This quilt is really giving you the latitude to do that. And so you don't always have to see something with a background that's a light or a dark. You could try something else. Let's take a peek at seam pressing. So on these are some of the blocks that I put together, and I'm showing you on the back what these seams look like. And we'll actually walk through these a little bit more in detail because there were a lot of learnings when I went through this the first time, and I pulled up the video and started showing you guys what we were doing. And I want to show you some fixes, some things that I do to go through this, and we'll go through them block by block and show you. We're doing finger pressing as we're sewing, and none of these have been put through the iron yet. So this is more on pressing matters. And so with this one, we've got the blocks. Then what I did was I flipped them over and looked at the back of this. Now notice on this one in particular, the seams are not all going the same direction. I allowed the weight of that bigger seam on the bottom to be pushed up. So as I was sewing them, then what I do is I press them the way that I think they should go. Now in this one in particular, this is a block that I just finished that I showed you the video. You can see on the top of this block, I lost that point. And a big reason that I lost that point had to do with when I sewed it together. It's sometimes hard when I sew on camera. I see this happening. But if you notice on this, I have a huge fat seam up there. Now in this one also, I saw that the seam was pressed. I had twisted it when I finger pressed it. And I probably pressed it from the front side and finger pressed it that way. But that seam looks a little heavy. This might be one. I don't often take things apart. I don't know that I will. I probably won't just because I've told you I will and it doesn't really matter. It didn't destroy the block, but what I could do is I could take out some seams. I also went back and I tried to press it a little bit tighter, and it just actually made it worse. So, it's your call. If you notice on the top of that block, you can see a slight dip in the block, and that's the extra seam that I have in the top of that. So then what I did was I went back and I tried some pressing and tried to make it a little bit better. Now on these guys, you notice, like I said, the seams do go different ways. There's not always a direction that is solid that you're going to look at. The other one is I'm going to show you some things where a seam would go one way as I was putting it together, and then I found that I had to twist it. So for example, on this one in particular, you can see the two places where it got sewn down and then the seam twisted, and I was fine. I'm going to leave that seam just the way it is. So I'm showing you the points there where the seam got turned, and it's fine. I'm okay with it. So on this bigger block, this is that Gerber. She looks pretty fine there. And I just had to do a tiny bit of pressing. I had some seams that were pushed out a little bit. And so these are the ones that they haven't been ironed yet. And you can see in here on the back of these guys, on that one in particular, let me go back just a little bit. Let me see if I can get it back just a couple slides. There we go. So on that one, you can see I have two places where the seam twisted. And I did go back and press this one, and I am fine with that. If you look, kind of over where that tailor's all to the right, the seam is going the way it's supposed to be going. On the other side, it's going the other way. I'm fine with it that way, and I'm going to leave it that way. I'm not going to change it. I won't trim it or clip it or anything like that. The block turned out great. Now that one in particular, it hasn't been pressed out further. So the first thing I do is I go in and I pressed it with my point-to-point turner. got it into place. None of these have been fully pressed except when I'm telling you I'm pressing them. And that's really systematically how I work. I do all that piecing, and I try not to go to the ironing board at all unless I have a question about I wonder if it's going to work on that one. And that is how I work on these guys. And I really encourage you to consider quitting running to your ironing board all the time. It's an exercise you don't need to do. Go for a walk or do something else. All right. Now, when we started this, I told you that there were several of you doing AccuQuilt, and some of you chose to do 6-inch blocks. Some of you chose to do 8-inch blocks. You will be framing these out to 9.5 inches edge to edge. Then you notice these guys, those are the 2 units that we had done in the last 2 clues, in clues 3 and 4, and they're going to frame your blocks out. Okay, so this is what the block is going to finish out like. And so this is what your quilt is going to look like when you're done if you follow the instructions that we have for putting it all together. So let's look at what this looks like as far as a finished quilt. And I'm going to show you some of the things, and let me show you the gallery. This is what the quilt looks like. And this is showing the back. We have a 108-inch wide backing that I used on this. And we've made this quilt a couple of times. So this was the first time that we made it. And it's a quilt that's called Hobo, and it's one by Kay England. And those of you who have guessed and said, hey, these blocks look really familiar, they look like Judy Martin's blocks. Yes. So 2 of the smartest people that I've ever worked with as designers, Kay England and Judy Martin, are part of this Mystery Monday. They both know about it, and we're looking forward to, I've given you some clues about our next run with Judy's blocks, and I really do hope you join us. It's not going to be the same quilt. We're going to be doing a different quilt and different projects. But this is the block. This is one of Judy's blocks that we had used in this. We had used this for Sewing Social, which was a program we did a little while back. We made this quilt a second time, and we're waiting for it to come back from the binder. And so we will make sure that we post some pictures of it. But it's using the blocks like what we have gone over with you in this. And this is what those units look like for those last 2 clues, for clues 3 and 4, that you're going to be attaching to the blocks. Now, while we're looking at the blocks here, if you notice, this is a 9-inch block. Those squares that we were cutting were 3.5-inch cut. That means they're 3-inch finish. So 3, 6, 9. And then what it does is it fits into the block, and to finish it out as entirely as a block, as a rectangular block, which is really cool. So I have the quilt behind me here, and you're going to love this. And it's great with it. So what happens if you use 8-inch? Well, you're going to be putting spacer borders around there, coping strips around that. And your coping strips can be light like the background, or they could be a dark fabric. So you can try different things. If you chose to do a 6-inch block, you'll enlarge that block up so that it measures out 9.5 inches. So those instructions are there in the instructions for clue number 5, and they tell you how to do that. Okay, now this is the real magic that I'm going to go over with you. The outer border around this quilt is one that you're going to be able to use again and again. I personally own about 6 books that are all about borders, and we hardly ever see border books anymore. The books that I own are from the 90s, and they didn't always tell you how to put them together. And this border that goes around this quilt is one that I learned so much, and I'm going to show you here in a little bit what I learned. We're going to look at the pattern. The biggest key to this is when you look at that border, is the border will be mostly built. You'll put this center together. The border will be mostly built, but I designed the border so that you could put coping strips. Coping strips are what you need to make something fit, either in the navy, you notice I've used that as an accent, or in the one that I'm going to show you, we used the light fabric to put as the coping strip. So let me see if I can find a picture of one that I can show you how that fit around there. So you can see it a little bit in this one along the right hand side there. I put a coping strip of a light background around that in order to make it fit around there. So I'm going to open this. This is the cover of the pattern. And when you get your pattern, we will actually be giving you um, a coupon code in the email, and you will be able to order this pattern from us and either have it shipped to you or you can pick it up sometime. And this is complimentary. And the pattern is being given to you in its entirety. You have all the instructions that you used for making the quilt or making the blocks in this separate clues. And then the pattern will show you how to create all of the setting around this. And so when you've got the pattern there in front of you, you can be working out of those pieces and getting those together. Now, the name of the quilt, it was in Kay's book, it was called the Hobo Quilt. And we renamed it Backroad Drifter, kind of the same thing with Kay's permission. And we put it together with the blocks as you see now. If you notice around the outside edge there, we have that light frame, and we added the frame to fit it to the border. And trust me, it's not real tough to do. You'll be able to do it. And in the instructions, it shows you a different way to put the borders. Now the border is our putting them together, and it shows you where you're using quarter square triangles and half square triangles on these border pieces. And all of this is the same instructions. Now you already have all the 4 patches put together, and most of the 4 patches. You don't have like those corners that you see in the block there. So you don't have those, but I know you still have some scrap fabric and you're going to be able to do that. So let me show you. I did a video of some aha moments that I had when I put this together. And I'm going to break out what I did on the border that was really, and again, I mean, we've sewn this, I've sewn it a couple of times, and I had some friends sew on their own versions too. And these were some big epiphanies that I had as I was working on this. So when we look at this border, we've got our 4 patches that we built, and we've got those 3 units that we put together. Now, this is the units mostly for that top border. And so what I'm doing is I'm taking my 4 patches and I'm setting them on point. And then I've got those little triangles in there. And technically, this is almost like making this whole thing into flying geese units. So I'm turning those, and if you can start to see what's happening here, and I duplicated them, so I had them for the top and the bottom. So as you look at the diagrams for how to put these together, this is how they go together. A lot of people try to sew these in little strips. And if you notice the 4 patches with those triangles, it goes together so much easier. So you're building all of these units and then you're putting them together into your borders, top, bottom, left, and right. So here we go. Now in this one, this is a close-up of the quilt, a little bit more of the close-up to the quilt. But I love working with these border pieces that you have around here. On these guys, you can see you've got your strips along the top and the bottom, and then that border around the outside edge. Now on this one in particular, the first time we did this, I was having trouble with the outer edge. I wasn't fitting it well together. And what ended up happening was I ended up cutting off that outer point because I wasn't happy with how it finished. So we did, at that point, we made a second one to make sure the instructions were good for you. And so we did that, and then we had another couple people who made these. So if you look at this, this is the close up of what it's looking like. Now the blocks that are in the center of this are different ones than what you have. But as you can see with this, I got frustrated with myself and just cut that whole thing off. And I'm fine with it, but it got me excited about doing it again. So I went ahead and had made the quilt a second time. The other one is I went in here and I played with another quilt. And I took a panel quilt that I had, and this is one that I did for panel play. And I was doing it about the same time to experiment with my theory of how to put this together. So if you look at that outside edge, I did the same thing. I put coping strips around my panel pieces. Now I've cuddle on the back of this and it's basted, ready to be machine quilts. I've just got to base the center of it. And then I fitted this around in a smaller piece around the outside edge. And again, so this is some of the work that I do when I'm trying to figure out if something is going to fit together or not. And a panel is a really good piece to use on something like this. I am a pin baster. I am not a fan of spray adhesives. I've pin basted for a really long time, and I'm pretty fast at it. We also teach people in start quilting how to pin baste without crawling all over the floor. So I'm finishing up this one to pin it. I actually pin basted this at this point to see how square my quilt was. And so I pin basted from the center out just to see how that outer edge piece was doing. And I was really pleased with how it turned out. So you can adapt the border that you have for this one for other pieces. When you are looking at patterns that you don't understand the borders of, this is a good opportunity to improve your skill set and just get a little bit better on piecing things. So that's what we've got for that. Okay. All right. So there we go. That's all my clues. That's everything that we have. Please follow the directions that I sent to you by email, and then also the instructions in there so you can get your backroads drifter pattern. Hopefully, I can see you in my next mystery. We have another Mystery Monday coming up, but we also have that other one that I had talked to you about that you really should think about attending. It's a cave mystery. So hopefully, I see you in both of those. Yes, you will enjoy having them. This one, again, was a blast to do with you. I can't wait to see more of your finishes out on Friends of Inspired Sew.